Alpha King notices the silent Omega near the crystal altar as a forbidden prophecy stirs awake. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. The moonlight was barely enough to illuminate the ancient stones of the crystal altar. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, as if the very earth beneath them knew of the prophecy that had slumbered for centuries. Seraphina stood silently at the altar, her eyes cast down, her presence barely noticed among the others. She was an Omega, one of the lowest in their pack, with no remarkable abilities or extraordinary strength. To most, she was invisible, a shadow in a world of wolves, yet there was something about her, a quiet aura that stirred the very air. Ethan, the Alpha King, watched her from a distance. His sharp eyes, accustomed to noticing every detail, were drawn to her inexplicable stillness. He had seen many Omegas before, but none like Seraphina. She was different, silent, like a breath held for far too long. There was something ancient in her, something that tugged at his instincts, though he couldn't yet understand why. As he approached the crystal altar, he felt an unfamiliar pulse in the air, a surge of energy that seemed to come from her. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The whispers of the old prophecy filled his mind, a tale long forgotten, a curse buried beneath centuries of peace. The prophecy spoke of a silent Omega, one who would awaken the ancient powers and fulfill a destiny no one could foresee. But Ethan had never believed in such things. Yet, here she was, Seraphina. Her quiet demeanor did nothing to hide the force within her. He had heard rumors about her, whispers that she had no wolf, that she was weak, useless, but standing here, in the moonlight, the air heavy with fate, he began to question everything he had ever known. Ethan moved closer, the stone beneath his boots barely making a sound. His eyes never left Seraphina, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the world had shifted. He had been the ruler of this kingdom for years, his power unchallenged, but something about her presence made him question the very foundation of his rule. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold crystal of the altar, his breath steady despite the turbulence building inside him. And that's when it happened. The crystal shimmered, a soft glow surrounding Seraphina as the prophecy stirred awake. Her body, still and silent, seemed to pulse with an energy that only he could sense, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt the power of fate itself. "You," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Seraphina's eyes lifted, meeting his gaze for the first time. In that moment, everything changed. Ethan knew that she was no ordinary Omega, and that her role in this prophecy was not just written in the stars, it was written in blood. The forbidden prophecy had begun to stir, and Seraphina was at its heart. Seraphina stood frozen, her eyes wide as she met the gaze of Alpha King Ethan. The world seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment, nothing else existed except the two of them. His intense silver eyes pierced through her, and she felt a strange pull, a deep connection that neither of them had anticipated. The air was thick with an unspoken understanding, as though something ancient and powerful had awakened within her, something that was now undeniably linked to him. Ethan took a slow step forward, his presence commanding, yet something in his expression softened as he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. He had ruled for years, his every decision deliberate and cold, but now, standing before this quiet Omega, he found himself questioning his own beliefs. "You don't belong here," he murmured, though the words were more of a statement than a question. "You should have been chosen long ago." Seraphina felt her breath catch in her throat. She had always been an outsider in the pack, ignored and discarded by everyone around her. The pack had shunned her for not having a wolf, for being defective, yet now, in front of Ethan, she felt something stir within her that she had never felt before. It wasn't just the prophecy that had begun to reveal itself, it was something far more personal, far more intense. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Ethan took another step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Do you know what you are?" His voice was low, but there was a sense of awe in it now, a reverence he hadn't intended. She shook her head, still unable to find her voice. But she could feel it, the connection between them, the energy that surged through her as she stood before him. Ethan extended his hand, slowly, as though afraid of frightening her away. "You're the one," he whispered. "The one the prophecy spoke of." Seraphina's heart skipped a beat. The prophecy had been nothing more than a story told around campfires, a tale passed down through generations, never believed to be true. But now, standing before the Alpha King, she could feel the weight of it, the truth of it. She wasn't just an Omega, she was the key to something far bigger than herself, something that could change the fate of the entire kingdom. Ethan's hand hovered just inches from hers, and in that moment, Seraphina understood what he was offering her. It wasn't just a chance to prove herself. It was a chance to fulfill a destiny that had been waiting for her all along. Her hand shook as she reached out, brushing her fingers against his. The touch was electric, sending a jolt of energy through her body, and she gasped, pulling her hand back as if she had been burned. Ethan's expression darkened, his eyes filled with determination. "There's no going back from this," he said quietly. "Once you accept this bond, there's no turning away. You will be bound to me and to this prophecy forever." Seraphina's heart raced. She had always lived in the shadows, always been the one left behind. But now, in the presence of Ethan, she felt seen for the first time in her life. She didn't know what this bond meant, or what it would require of her, but one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. She looked up at Ethan, her breath steadying as she made her choice. "I accept," she whispered. And with that simple declaration, everything changed. The moonlight bathed the clearing in an ethereal glow as Seraphina stood beside the Alpha King, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. Ethan's presence, commanding and unwavering, felt like an unspoken promise, though neither of them fully understood the depth of the bond they had just formed. She could still feel the electric tingle where their fingers had touched, and her heart raced, not with fear, but with something else, something new, something she had never felt before. "You are not like the others," Ethan said quietly, his voice carrying a quiet awe. Seraphina met his gaze, the intensity of his silver eyes making her feel as though he could see straight through her. "I never wanted to be like them," she replied softly. The others, the Omegas who had been chosen and discarded, had never mattered to her. They were shadows of what she could be, empty echoes of strength and power she would never possess. Yet, here, with Ethan, she felt something stirring within her, something powerful that defied everything she had been taught to believe. Ethan stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers again, this time lingering a little longer, as though he were testing the weight of their connection. "You understand what this means, don't you?" he asked, his voice low, yet filled with urgency. Seraphina nodded slowly, her mind still racing to catch up with the words he had spoken. "The prophecy," she whispered. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice heavy with something she couldn't quite place. "You are the one. The one who will help me break the curse, the one who will lead us all to a future we could only dream of." The words hung in the air between them, impossibly heavy. Seraphina's mind struggled to grasp their meaning. She had always thought the prophecy was just a legend, a tale passed down through generations, meant to bring hope in times of darkness. Yet now, standing beside the Alpha King, she realized the weight of it. She was no longer just a bystander in her own life. She was part of something far bigger than herself. "But I don't have a wolf," Seraphina said, her voice barely above a whisper. She had always been told she was weak, that her inability to shift meant she could never be part of the pack. Ethan's eyes softened as he reached out, taking her hand in his, this time with a gentleness she hadn't expected from the king known for his cold demeanor. "You are more than what they told you," he said, his voice low and reassuring. "You have something far greater than a wolf. You have the strength to awaken something that no one else can." Seraphina felt a surge of warmth fill her chest at his words, but doubt still lingered. How could she, someone who had been so easily dismissed, be the key to breaking a curse that had plagued the kingdom for so long? Ethan seemed to sense her uncertainty. "Trust in what you feel," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "The prophecy is awakening, and it is tied to you, to us. The moon has already chosen you." The words were simple, but they carried a weight she could not ignore. For the first time in her life, Seraphina felt like she was standing at the edge of something monumental, something that could change everything. She didn't know what the future held, or what role she would play in it, but one thing was certain: she would not back down. With a deep breath, she looked up at Ethan, her heart steadying. "I will stand by you," she said, her voice firm, filled with a determination that surprised even herself. Ethan's gaze softened, a flicker of something warm passing through his eyes. "Together, we will change the future," he said, his voice resolute. As they stood there, side by side, beneath the moonlight, Serafina knew that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take them both to places they never thought possible. The days that followed felt like a blur to Serafina. Her heart, still racing from the moment she had pledged herself to Ethan, was now filled with a strange sense of anticipation. The moonlight, which once felt distant and indifferent, now seemed to watch over her like a constant companion, a reminder of the prophecy that had begun to unfold. Ethan had kept his promise. He never left her side, his presence a steady anchor as they navigated the weight of their new bond. Every moment spent with him felt like stepping deeper into a world she had never imagined, a world where power, fate, and destiny intertwined in ways she had only heard of in whispered legends. Despite the quiet reassurance he offered, Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that she was still an outsider, unsure of what her role would truly be. Every time she looked at Ethan, she saw not just the Alpha King, but a man burdened by the weight of his kingdom and the curse that had haunted him for so long. She had seen the pain in his eyes when they first met, the haunted look that lingered beneath his stoic expression. It was as if the very air around him carried the weight of his past, a past that seemed to dictate every decision he made. But when he looked at her, when their eyes met, there was something else, something softer, something more vulnerable. It was in those quiet moments that Serafina began to understand that her presence here, at his side, was not just about fulfilling a prophecy. It was about him finding peace, finding someone who could see beyond the title, beyond the power, and into the heart of who he truly was. One evening, as they stood in the courtyard beneath the vast expanse of stars, Ethan turned to her, his expression contemplative. "You're more than just the prophecy, Serafina," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years of doubt and uncertainty. "You've awakened something in me, something I thought I had lost long ago." Serafina looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. She had never considered that her mere presence could have such an effect on him. The world around them seemed to fade as their connection deepened, the silent bond between them growing stronger with each passing day. "I didn't choose this," she replied quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't choose to be the one who would help you break the curse. But I'm here now, and I'll do whatever it takes." Ethan's gaze softened, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. "I don't want you to do this because you feel obligated," he said, his voice full of sincerity. "I want you to be here because you want to be." Serafina's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't realized until that moment how much she had been holding back. She had been afraid that she wasn't enough, that her lack of a wolf, her inability to shift, would forever mark her as inadequate. But in Ethan's presence, she felt a growing sense of purpose, a purpose that had nothing to do with the prophecy and everything to do with herself. "I'm here because I believe in this," she said, her voice steady now. "I believe in you, in us. And I will stand by you, no matter what comes." Ethan smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Then we are one step closer to breaking the curse," he said, his voice full of quiet determination. "Together." The night stretched on, the stars above them seeming to shimmer with newfound hope. Serafina felt the weight of their shared journey ahead, but for the first time, she felt ready. Ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, side by side with the Alpha King who had become so much more than she had ever imagined. And as they stood there, beneath the endless sky, Serafina knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one that would shape the future of their world, and of themselves. As the days passed, the bond between Serafina and Ethan grew stronger, though the weight of their shared mission still loomed over them. They spent countless hours together, studying the ancient texts that spoke of the prophecy, trying to decipher the meaning behind each cryptic word. The more they learned, the more Serafina began to understand the magnitude of the task before them. Yet, with every revelation, the doubt that had settled in her heart never fully disappeared. Could she truly be the one to break the curse that had haunted Ethan for so long? Ethan, too, struggled with the enormity of their situation. He had been the Alpha King for years, ruling with authority and strength, yet now, with Serafina by his side, he was confronted with a side of himself he had long buried, the vulnerability that came with trusting someone else with the fate of his kingdom and of himself. One evening, as they sat in the royal library, surrounded by ancient scrolls and dusty tomes, Ethan looked up from his studies, his gaze lingering on Seraphina. She had been so focused on the pages in front of her that she hadn't noticed him watching. She looked so different now, no longer the quiet, shunned Omega she once was, but someone filled with purpose, with a light that Ethan couldn't ignore. "You've come so far," he said, his voice filled with quiet admiration. Seraphina looked up, meeting his gaze. "I'm just doing what's needed," she replied softly, though she knew there was more to it than that. In the time they had spent together, she had realized that the prophecy was not just about breaking a curse or fulfilling a destiny, it was about them, about their connection, and the strength they drew from each other. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table. "I don't know if I can do this without you," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "The curse, it has consumed me for so long. I thought I could handle it, but now, with everything we've learned, I see that I was wrong." Seraphina's heart ached as she saw the weight of his words. She had always known that Ethan carried the burden of his title, but hearing him speak of it so openly made her realize just how deeply the curse had affected him. She stood up and moved to his side, her presence steady and calm. "You're not alone in this," she said, her voice firm. "I may not have the powers you expected, but I have something else, something that will help us." Ethan turned to her, his expression filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "And what is that?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Hope," Seraphina replied, her eyes meeting his with an unwavering certainty. "We have hope. And together, we can face anything." Ethan's heart swelled with emotion as he looked at her. She had no idea how much her words meant to him, how much she had become the anchor he never knew he needed. He reached out, taking her hand in his, the connection between them stronger than ever. "Together," he said softly, "we'll face whatever comes next, side by side." As the days turned into weeks, Seraphina and Ethan continued their journey together, facing each challenge with a renewed sense of purpose. The weight of the prophecy still hung over them, but it no longer felt like a curse. It felt like a promise, one that would lead them to a future they could shape together. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt a glimmer of hope, a hope that the curse could finally be broken, and that he could live a life free of its shadow. For Seraphina, that hope was enough. She had never imagined that she could be a part of something so much larger than herself, but with Ethan by her side, she knew that anything was possible. As the days turned into weeks, Seraphina and Ethan found themselves growing closer, their bond strengthening with each passing moment. The burden of the prophecy, once a heavy weight on their shoulders, now felt more like a shared responsibility. They had come to realize that their connection wasn't just part of some ancient tale, it was real, and it was theirs to shape. The journey ahead would not be easy, but together, they would face whatever challenges lay in wait. One evening, as they walked through the royal gardens, Seraphina stopped to admire the blooming flowers, their colors vivid against the backdrop of the darkening sky. Ethan, always attuned to her presence, paused beside her. "You seem lost in thought," he said, his voice warm and inviting. She glanced up at him, her heart fluttering at the tenderness in his tone. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," she said softly. "I never imagined I'd be here, standing by your side, much less be part of something so important." Ethan reached out and gently cupped her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "You are more than just a part of this, Seraphina," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "You are the heart of it. Without you, none of this would be possible." Seraphina's breath caught in her throat. She had always believed that she was nothing, that her place in this world was insignificant. But Ethan's words, simple yet powerful, made her see herself in a new light. For the first time, she felt like she mattered, like her presence was not only valued but essential. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would do without you." Ethan smiled, a rare and genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You'll never have to find out. I'll always be here, Seraphina. Always." They stood there for a moment, the world around them falling away as they shared this quiet understanding. It was a bond that transcended the prophecy, transcended their roles as Alpha King and Omega. It was something more, something they had built together, and something that would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Later that night, as they sat by the fire in the royal chambers, Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "There's still much we don't know," he said, his voice laced with a quiet intensity. "But we've come this far together. I believe we can face anything, as long as we're together." Serafina nodded, her heart swelling with both love and determination. "I believe that too," she said, her voice steady. "Whatever the prophecy asks of us, we will face it. Together." Ethan's hand found hers, and as their fingers intertwined, Serafina felt the weight of the future ahead, but for the first time, it didn't feel so heavy. Together, they would find a way forward. Together, they would break the curse that had haunted his bloodline for generations. And whatever challenges awaited them, Serafina knew she was ready to face them, as long as Ethan was by her side. As the days passed, the bond between Serafina and Ethan only grew stronger, but so did the challenges they faced. The prophecy, once a vague and distant story, was now an undeniable reality. It hung over them, a constant reminder of the responsibility they both carried. Each day, they studied the ancient texts more intently, piecing together fragments of the prophecy in hopes of uncovering what the future held for them. Yet, for all their progress, there was one thing they could not yet decipher: the moment when the prophecy would come to its climax. They knew that Ethan's curse, the one that had plagued his bloodline for generations, was the key to unlocking everything, but they didn't know how to break it, or if they even could. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the moon began to rise, Serafina sat by the window of their private chambers, lost in thought. Ethan was nearby, reviewing more scrolls, but there was a quiet distance between them tonight, a space filled with unspoken words. She could feel the weight of his silence, and it mirrored the heaviness in her heart. She had promised him that they would face this together, but the fear of failure still lingered at the edges of her thoughts. Ethan looked up from his scrolls, sensing her unease. Without a word, he crossed the room and sat beside her. For a moment, they just sat in silence, the quiet between them a comfortable one. Ethan reached out, gently taking her hand in his grip steady and warm. "Serafina," he began softly, his voice quieter than usual, "do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing? If we're strong enough to face what's coming?" Serafina turned to him, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his eyes. For so long, she had seen him as the unshakable Alpha King, the ruler who commanded armies and shaped the destiny of kingdoms. But in this moment, she saw him as a man who had been carrying the weight of a curse that threatened to destroy everything he had worked for. "I do," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wonder if I'm enough. If I can truly help you break this curse. But then I remember how far we've come, how much we've already overcome. And I know we can face whatever comes next." Ethan's eyes softened, and for the first time, Serafina saw the flicker of something more than just the Alpha King in him. There was tenderness, gratitude, and love. "You've given me more strength than I ever thought possible," he said quietly, his thumb brushing over the back of her hand. "You're not just helping me break a curse, Serafina. You're giving me something I never had: hope." Serafina's heart swelled with emotion, her eyes welling with tears she hadn't expected. She had always felt like an outsider, never quite fitting in with the pack, never quite understanding her place in the world. But here, with Ethan, she felt like she mattered, like her presence was essential to the future they were both fighting for. "I believe in you, Ethan," she said, her voice steady despite the flood of emotions inside her. "I believe in us. And no matter what happens, I will stand by you. Together, we will break this curse. Together, we will shape our future." Ethan's gaze deepened, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that sent a shiver through her. "Then we will face the future together," he said, his voice resolute. "And we will face it as equals. No matter the darkness that lies ahead, we will find the light." As they sat there, hand in hand, the world outside seemed to fade away. There were no more doubts, no more fears. There was only them, two souls intertwined, ready to face whatever the future held. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Serafina knew one thing for sure: as long as she and Ethan were together, nothing could break them. The prophecy had awakened, but so had their strength, and together, they would forge a future that belonged to them. The days seemed to pass in a blur as the weight of the prophecy pressed heavier on their hearts. Seraphina and Ethan had spent countless hours together, studying the ancient texts and meditating on the cryptic words that would lead them to their destiny. But the closer they got to the truth, the more it seemed as though the answers they sought remained just out of reach. Despite the growing tension between them, there was a sense of peace that had settled over Seraphina. She had found her place by Ethan's side, not just as the Omega bound by prophecy, but as the woman who had come to mean something more to him. There were moments, fleeting as they were, when their eyes met and a silent understanding passed between them, a shared belief that they were stronger together than apart. It was a feeling that had taken time to cultivate, but now it was unshakable. One afternoon, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the vast lands of the kingdom, Seraphina leaned against the railing, her eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan was close beside her, his presence a comforting weight that steadied her. "Do you ever think about what happens after the curse is broken?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's gaze never left the horizon, but she could sense the shift in him as he contemplated her question. "I've thought about it a lot," he said, his voice low, heavy with the weight of his thoughts. "But every time I try to imagine a future beyond this, beyond the curse, I come up empty. I don't know what life will look like when it's all over." Seraphina turned to face him, her heart aching at the uncertainty in his eyes. "You don't have to figure it all out right now," she said, reaching out to take his hand. "We don't have to know every step of the journey. We just have to trust that when the time comes, we'll be ready." Ethan looked at her, his gaze filled with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know how I got so lucky," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You came into my life when I least expected it, and now I can't imagine a future without you." Seraphina smiled, her heart swelling with affection for him. "And I can't imagine it without you either." For a moment, the world around them seemed to pause. There were no more prophecies, no more curses, just the two of them, standing side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The connection between them, forged through trials and shared struggles, felt like the most real thing in the world. It was a connection that no curse, no prophecy, could ever break. That evening, as they sat together by the fire, the flames flickering in the hearth casting soft shadows on the walls, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice tight with uncertainty. Seraphina's heart skipped a beat, a ripple of unease running through her. "What is it?" she asked, her gaze fixed on him. Ethan hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words. "I've always known that my bloodline was cursed," he began, his voice steady despite the heaviness of his words. "But what I didn't know, what I didn't understand until now, is that the curse isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about everything we've built, everything we'll build together." Seraphina frowned, confusion creeping in. "What do you mean?" Ethan's eyes darkened, the weight of his family's past pressing down on him. "The curse is tied to the throne, to the blood that runs through my veins. And when it's broken, when the prophecy is fulfilled, it will change everything. It will change the very foundation of this kingdom." Seraphina felt her pulse quicken, a sense of foreboding creeping up her spine. "And what happens then?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked at her, his expression conflicted. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we will face it together. Whatever it is, we will face it together." As the fire crackled between them, Seraphina's mind raced, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. She had always known that their journey would be fraught with uncertainty, but now, standing on the precipice of the unknown, she felt a new sense of resolve. Whatever the future held, she would face it with Ethan by her side. And together, they would shape their own destiny. The days that followed were filled with quiet anticipation. Seraphina and Ethan had come so far together, but the final pieces of the prophecy were still elusive, and the weight of what was to come hung heavily in the air. They continued their studies, deciphering ancient texts and visiting the oracle who had once foreseen their union. Each revelation brought them closer to the truth, yet the answers they sought remained just beyond their grasp. One evening, as they sat together in the grand library of the royal palace, Seraphina looked up from the ancient scroll she had been reading. Ethan was beside her, his focus intense, his brow furrowed as he carefully studied the writings in front of him. Ethan, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever wonder if we're meant for this? If this prophecy was really meant for us? Ethan paused, his gaze lifting to meet hers. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the doubt that lingered despite the strength she had shown in the days before. I used to question it, he admitted, his voice low. I used to think that I was cursed, that the weight of my family's past would crush everything I tried to build. But now I see it differently. I see that this prophecy, this journey we're on, it's ours to shape. Serafina felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had always believed in destiny, in fate, but with Ethan, it felt different. It wasn't just something that was written in the stars, it was something they could create together. I'm afraid, she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. Afraid that I'm not enough, that we won't be able to break the curse, that I won't be able to help you. Ethan reached out, taking her hand gently in his. You are enough, he said firmly. You've already done more for me than I could ever repay. You've given me something I thought I had lost, hope. Serafina looked down at their hands, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always been an outsider, never quite fitting in with the pack, never quite understanding her place in the world. But with Ethan, she felt like she had found her purpose. But what if we fail, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if the prophecy doesn't come true? What if we can't break the curse? Ethan's grip tightened around her hand, a sense of determination filling his voice. We won't fail, he said, his tone resolute. We have come this far, and we will go further. Together. Serafina looked up at him, her heart racing. She could see the strength in his eyes, the unwavering resolve that had made him the alpha king he was. It was a strength that she now shared, a strength born from their bond, from their connection. Together, she repeated, her voice steady now. We will face whatever comes next. The fire that had burned so brightly in their hearts when they first met had only grown stronger, and Serafina knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. The final stage of their journey was drawing near, and with it, the moment when the prophecy would either be fulfilled or shattered. But Serafina no longer feared it. She was ready to embrace her destiny, to stand by Ethan's side as they confronted whatever lay in store. And as they sat there, hand in hand, the weight of their future together felt lighter than it ever had before. They had come so far, and now, together, they would shape their fate.